get it, because the name of the game is H3H3 Ball Writer. Okay, seriously though, let's talk about this. I've been a big fan of H3H3 for quite some time, probably since 2015, 2014. And Ethan and Hila have made me laugh countless times with their content. And they've been a big inspiration on my comedy. Well, comedy, I guess, because really I would consider my videos education more so than comedy, but you get me. Now, I'll admit, I've barely heard anything from the H3 podcast aside from a few highlight clips on YouTube. And it's not that I have anything against it per se, it's just that I never really got into it. However, I have heard many controversial things about the podcast, which I'll get to in a bit. But first, let's talk about H3H3 Ball Writer. As we all know, there comes a time in a YouTuber's life cycle where they make a video game, like Smosh's Food Battle, PewDiePie's Quest for the Brofist, or whatever it's called, and now H3H3 Ball Writer. Before I start on the video promoting the game, let me first give a bit of context. H3 hadn't uploaded anything on their main channel in 3 months, and after all that time, this was their big comeback video. Now, let's proceed. Okay, so as you can see, the video starts off normally enough with just Ethan and Hila hanging out on the beach and making a couple of goofs. Despite this, I couldn't help but get the feeling that something was off. Ethan talks about the video game for a bit, and it ends with Ethan going inside a giant beach ball. Overall, nothing that I've said sounds too bad, but then I realized how manipulative the video is. Before you go disliking this video, I just want to clarify that I don't think Ethan's the next Hitler just because of this. I think that despite his mistakes, which we'll talk about later, he's a decent guy, but my god is this video terrible. It begins with Ethan saying,
"Have you ever wanted to ride a huge inflatable ball on the beach? What about a huge inflatable sweaty dude named Ethan? Would you ride his fupa? We need a hero to ride that fupa. Hila."
Already, the fact that he's relying on references to convince you this is a quality product starts to peek its head out. And god, the way he lists these things feels so condescending.
Challenge your friends and foes to a race and win prizes. Power-ups. Race in daily and weekly global events.
Maybe he's trying to poke fun of bad mobile game adverts, but it really doesn't come off that way. I mean, the amount of H3 memes and jokes in this 2-minute advertisement is kinda ridiculous.
Fupa, Fupa Rider, Vape Nation. The competition. The Fupalicious Fupa.
Free guys, I'll see you all next time. Or
And again, it just feels pandering. They even managed to throw in a "Michaela, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind?" joke in there, even though it makes zero sense in the context and is only mildly humorous if you already know the reference. Like I said, it just feels off. But what about the game itself? Well, out of curiosity, I actually downloaded the game and played for about an hour or so, and it was pretty okay. The gameplay was not bad. I actually quite like the music. But the game gets kind of boring after half an hour. So, you might be wondering, that's it? They made a mediocre mobile game? Well, yes and no. Well, the original point of this video was to point out how bad the advert was and how much of a disappointing return to the original channel it was. I found out that the rabbit hole goes much deeper. Well, let's talk about the H3 podcast. As I already said, I'm not an expert on the podcast. Every time it happens, God, okay. Well, let's talk about the H3. Well, let's talk about the H3 podcast. As I already mentioned, I'm far from an expert on the podcast, but after hearing some allegations about Ethan being in over his head, I decided to listen to more of it. And I can now confirm that yes, he is in fact way in over his head. Now here's the main problem with him. He thinks he's a political commentator. Let me say I don't have a problem with politics getting mixed with comedy. Two of my favorite comedians, Bill Burr and Louis C.K., dabble in political humor a lot. However, they know how to separate serious political debates from jokes about politics. Ethan does not. If there's anything worse than an ass talking about politics, it's an ass with millions of followers talking about politics. Firstly, though, I want to point out two videos. The first is H3H3, an 87-year-old woman who was tased by the operator. The other is H3H3 Should Just Stick to Comedy by Diesel Patches. Both are great videos, and I highly recommend you check them out if you want to learn more. As for the tasing and Catholic Church controversies, I will not cover them, as both previously mentioned YouTubers did much better than I ever will. I also tried to search for clips I could use from the H3 podcast to highlight how far Ethan set this up his ass, but when I started watching it, I realized another thing. The podcast is kind of boring. But really, I don't have anything else to say that anybody else hasn't said already. So, yeah. Overall, I just want to say that I don't hate Ethan, I don't hate Hila, and I don't hate H3 as a whole. In fact, I would be more than glad to see it recapture that old charm it had of just them making weird skits and making fun of delusional people online. And if they keep milking the podcast, I guess nothing gold can stay.